Yes. Hi, everybody. It's just me. This is so awkward. Oh, God. Where's my girl at? Anyway, hi. It's Sunday, July 28th at 9:30 p.m. I just spent like the last 3.5 hours putting this outline together. So I hope you really enjoy this episode. It was a labor of love, but something that many people reached out and said that they were really interested in, that they really needed. So here we are. We are about to talk politics is unusual because what the fuck is going on? So much has happened since the last recording. But first up, let me just say that this is going to be a solo dolo episode. Not because Shanti and I are beefing. I mean that with all sincerity. We are actually in a really great place. Our couples therapy is going so well. We're learning so much about each other. We're actually really enjoying each other again in a way that I don't know that we had been. So it's really lovely. She is vending right now in DC, I think at Broccoli Fest, or coming back from that. She looks super cute on IG, but you know, the girl is busy. So we need to respect that. And I'm here. I'm here holding it down. And I'm going to do my very best to just provide information to be as unbiased as possible. Obviously, I am biased, but I'm doing the best that I can. With that said, I'm just going to jump right into it. Okay. So, where we left off the last time we recorded, I think it might have been a week or 2 weeks ago because we are still on our break. The Democrats were calling for Joseph Robinette to leave the top of the ticket. And the Republican National Convention was actually underway. I think we were on day 2 of it, and Trump had not yet spoken. JD Vance had just been announced as Trump's running mate, his vice president nominee, and that's going so well. Kamala Harris was standing 10 toes down beside Joseph Robinette. She was not playing them games. She said, "That is my president. He is fully capable of doing the job," etc., etc. Oh boy. And Congress hadn't yet given Netanyahu, the war criminal, over 50 standing ovations when he spoke in the joint Congress, which I just found to be so appalling. And Sonia Massey was still alive. Was she? 2 weeks ago, she wasn't. We just weren't talking about it. She died, I believe, was murdered July 3rd. So it hadn't hit the national news. Wow, that's wild. That's a whole other topic that I'm going to get into. So, with all of that said, I'm going to approach this episode in that order. Okay, I've really tried to make sure that I'm organized in my thoughts. Of course, I have clips, and it gets a little tricky to try to play clips and do the recording and pay attention and understand what I'm saying. So bear with me, offer me a little bit of grace because I don't have my number 2, my road dog, with me here. But here we go. All right. So Biden withdraws from the race. This is something that I did not think was going to happen. I just couldn't see Biden getting over his ego. And I also thought that it's unprecedented, really. Like not many presidents have actually put country over themselves and their own ambition. And Joe Biden is someone who everybody describes as he's the underdog. And, he gets into these races, he gets into these situations that everyone says you can't win. And he's been pretty successful in his career in getting certain legislation passed, in beating Trump in 2020, etc. So I just didn't see it happening. And it did. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about that because everybody and their mom has spoken about that. But there's a really great podcast episode from The Daily, which is of the New York Times, that really details how he came to that conclusion, who was around him, what information they were presenting to him, and how all of this unfolded. And that podcast name is Joe Biden Drops Out. The link will be linked in the description of this episode for you to check out. I think it's like 30 minutes, and it's really illuminating. I will say that the Democrats pushed him out. We've been talking about that. I have mixed feelings about it. I felt like it was something that he needed to do for the country, for the party, especially since the stakes are so high. But the way that they did it just felt so backhanded and honestly disrespectful. But I think that they were desperate. I think that they have learned a little bit of their lesson when it comes to these titans. And I say that with respect, meaning this older generation that they've dedicated their lives to being public servants and probably most likely gotten a taste of power in a way that they don't know how to be anything else but a political player. They thrive off of the power. They thrive off of the backhanded deals, the politics, the whole Washington kind of scene. And so they don't leave. And that I'm thinking of, off the top of my head, Dianne Feinstein, RGB, who really put us in quite the predicament when she passed away, God rest her soul, despite being the titan that she was. I even think, honestly, of Maxine Waters. I love her. I love Mama Maxine. Mama Maxine, I believe, is older than Joe Biden. I'm thinking about Nancy Pelosi. I don't know if I love Nancy Pelosi. I respect the badass that she is when it comes to politics, but here we are. So the overall messaging around "you're too old, you can't do it" felt really wrong to me. But I also was swayed a little bit when I heard a group of some Democrats, some independents, and some Republican women on CNN. They were talking about Joe dropping out and how much they respected it. And many of them who were Democratic leaning were saying that after they saw the debate, that they were really concerned and that they were no longer energized in this election, and they had kind of resigned themselves to losing because they said they had seen people's decline. They know what it is to decline. They've witnessed it. They may have even experienced it themselves, and that it happened so quickly that they did not have confidence in him. And they had just resigned to another Trump presidency. So with all that said, Biden, now that he's done this, will be remembered as a hero. He will be remembered as a great president. And that's going to make a lot of people listening to this podcast uncomfortable due to his role in the genocide in Gaza. His history in public office is far from stained, thinking of the crime bill, thinking of the Anita Hill hearings, etc. But, he stepped up and stepped in at a time in 2020 where he did save us from another 4 years of Trump. He appointed the first Black woman Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson. He appointed the first openly gay Black woman as the White House Press Secretary, Karen Jean-Pierre. He appointed the first Black South Asian woman Vice President, Kamala Harris. And, many regard him as one of the most effective presidents in recent history when it comes to pushing major legislation while, I mean, it's often been overshadowed by the far right Supreme Court rulings that are stripping us of so many of our rights that we believe to be law of the land. And I feel like he came into the presidency at a real time of turmoil, where Trump had really exposed many of the cracks that I feel like progressives and Black and brown folks always knew were there and were always dismayed by. But I will say, I don't know how all this shit works. I know that the economy was in a terrible place. I know it still feels like it's in a terrible place. The numbers don't tell that story. The feeling, though, does, right? I just saw something today that said that, raises at work are actually trending higher than inflation, and inflation's actually going down since the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if we're feeling that yet. I sure am not, but the numbers are the numbers, right? And so if Kamala wins, he'll also be known as this lifelong public servant, whether we agree with his policies or not, right? We cannot deny him of the fact that he's been serving this country since 1972. The man could have went home and went to sleep. And again, this is tricky because you want to believe that he's serving his country because he is truly in service to the country, not because it's feeding his ego and he's addicted to power and politics. But him stepping aside makes people believe that he was a servant, that is where he's coming from. I mean, you have to consider, he lost his wife in a car accident just weeks after he became a senator. And he was of like one of the youngest senators to ever become a senator. And so he loses his wife, he considers leaving, he gets talked out of leaving, he stays, and he works. I mean, he's had 2 brain aneurysms operated on while he was in the Senate. Then he loses his son to brain cancer when he's serving as vice president. And all the while, he's managing his other son's addictions while serving. And so I mentioned this, but I do want to talk about just some of the things that I read in an article today. I think it was from Politico. Yeah, I think it was from by Politico. And the number of uninsured Americans hit an all-time low this year of 7.2%. The economy added 14.8 million jobs over his first 3 years of his term. That's more than any other president in U.S. history over the same period. I mean, unemployment has held below 4% for the largest stretch of time since the 1960s. Yet many workers have been dissatisfied because of inflation. So it kind of wiped out some of the gains that he made. And the U.S. after COVID, there was so much violence. The violence had soared far more than any other decade. And when Biden got into office, it rose again slightly in 2021, but then it started to fall, which can be attributed to some of his major policies, some of his funding to go towards more community-centered work, and also, more jobs being available. So, all things to consider. If you're interested in actually hearing about some of the things that Joe and Kamala got done during their time, there's a great piece in Politico. It's called 30 Things Joe Biden Did as President You May Have Missed. I'll link that in the description as well, just in case you're interested in that. But Joe dropped out, something that I never thought we were going to see, but something that was really necessary. I feel now. I was very against it, and I'm going to talk about that a little later as to why. But I feel that I was dead ass wrong. And I'm happy I was. So that's that. All right, let's move on to the Republican National Convention and its insanity. The Republican National Convention, you know, you've got Hulk Hogan screaming in the mic. You heard some of the clips of some of the people that spoke on the last episode. I mean, it was just like a big old MAGA rally. Not much policy being stated. A lot of people have been fact checking a lot of the speeches. It's coming up that so much of the statements were false. But, you know, you're making these statements to a roaring crowd that actually wasn't so roaring when Donald Trump came on, and we'll talk about that. When we first recorded, Donald Trump hadn't made his speech yet. And so the very next day he does. It is an hour and a half, maybe even more long speech, which is like unfucking precedented. I don't know that anybody's talked that. No, they said that's the longest convention speech ever. And so they were likening him to Fidel Castro, who used to, I mean, I think he has like a 9-hour speech on the books. So they were just saying that like this is part of this narcissist authoritarian behavior when you have these long speeches. There were people leaving, the camera was panning, people were looking around like, all right, this is going too long. He didn't go on stage until 10 o'clock. Melania strutted out there and acted like she wanted to be there for the 2 seconds that she was, poor girl. And yeah, there had been reports saying that Trump, after his assassination attempt, that he had ripped up his convention speech and that he was going to deliver a speech of unity and to really calm down the violent rhetoric. And he achieved that in the first 20 minutes. And then he failed miserably. It was very Trump. I mean, he really milked the assassination attempt. He started out with that. He recounted all of the details, reading from the teleprompter, starting with, you know, I wasn't supposed to be here today, but God had other plans. So he really had elevated himself to this being that God saved because he was supposed to be here, which I thought was really interesting because, you know, someone died at that rally. And so what are you saying? That God didn't feel like they were supposed to be here? I don't know, but I get it. God wanted you here, fine. And he also said that he was rededicating himself to God and all this bullshit. Okay, cool. He comes out with the maxi pad on his ear. A bunch of the crowd has the maxi pads on their ear. You know, they're screaming, fight, 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 which is apparently the new MAGA slogan. And he really humanized himself in the first 20 minutes. He really did. He spoke slowly and he spoke pretty accurately, according to his accounts of what happened. Then he dips into the nonsense. Then he starts calling Nancy Pelosi crazy Nancy Pelosi. He starts attacking Biden and Biden's record. And what's so great about this today is that this is not even the human that you're going to be running against anymore. So we have to consider that the whole Republican National Convention, for the most part, they got some digs on Kamala as well in there, but it was centered around Sleepy Joe Biden, who is no longer the person you're running against. So all of the market research, all of the signage, the whole campaign up until that point was centered around beating Joe Biden. And now that Joe Biden is not on the ticket at all, you have to rethink your entire campaign within the last 100 days. And tricky. But before I get into that, PBS actually fact-checked his speech and found that so much of it was false. Do I even want to read this? Do I even want to read some of this? I mean, he said immigrants are coming from prisons, they're coming from jails, they're coming from mental institutions and insane asylums. That is false. They said that is false when Trump said earlier this year that Biden is letting in millions of immigrants from jails, mental institutions. We rated it pants on fire. Immigration officials arrested about 103,700 non-citizens with criminal convictions, whether in the US or abroad. And not everyone was let in. The term non-citizens includes people who may have legal immigration status in the US but are not US citizens. The data reflects that these people are that the federal government knows about, but it's not exhaustive research, it's not exhaustive data, and they have no idea where these people are coming from. There are no claims or facts to substantiate his claims, rather, that they're coming from psychiatric hospitals. This guy. He said El Salvador's murders are down 70% because they're sending all their murderers to the United States of America. That's false. There's been a significant drop in crime in El Salvador, but it's not because the country is sending prisoners to the U.S. It just goes on, and a lot of it was geared towards immigration and migrants, because that, again, is what he wanted to run on, which is why he told the Republicans to kill the bipartisan immigration bill that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and members of Congress had put forth and come to an agreement on. It just goes on and on. I'm not going to go through this. I'll link this in the description as well if you're interested. But I do want to bring up the fact that, we were talking a lot about Joe Biden and how, does Joe Biden have the mental capacity to move forward in this race? And I just have to question Trump's mental capacity and whether or not he has it all up there, because then he goes back on this Hannibal Lecter thing. And I just don't understand why he keeps bringing this up and keeps labeling Hannibal Lecter as the late, great Hannibal Lecter. I'm going to play it because y'all going to think I'm lying, and I'm not.
The press is always on me because I say this. Has anyone seen Silence of the Lambs? The late, great Hannibal Lecter. He'd love to have you for dinner. That's insane asylums. They're emptying out their insane asylums. And terrorists are coming in at numbers that we've never seen before. Bad things are going to happen. Meanwhile, our crime rate is going up while crime statistics all over the world are going down because they're taking their criminals and they're putting them into our country.
Anyway, that's also false. The crime rates are actually going down in this country, but whatever, bruh. You got it. You know what? I just realized we didn't take a break for our sponsors, and we live in a capitalist world, so we have to. And with that, let's take a little bit of a break, and I'll be right back with the mess that is JD Vance, aka 2004 Sarah Palin. After these messages, we'll be right back. Boop. And we are back. So let's talk JD Vance. JD Vance at the Republican National Convention, I actually listened to his speech and I thought he did a good job. A lot of people felt like, oh yeah, this is the guy that is going to really appeal to the forgotten rural electorate, excuse me, and that Rust Belt group of folks. I mean, he was really supposed to cast himself as a fighter for these forgotten blue collar working class people. And it is just not landing. JD Vance has no charisma on these campaign ads, on the campaign trail, the clips that they're clipping of him on social media. It's almost as if these people are Democrats trying to ruin him. His approval rate is -6%. Not 6%, -6. So he is not appealing to that base at all. And I'm shocked because I'm just curious to know, like, did the Republican Party vet him? Did they look through his history at all, any of his interviews, any of his podcast interviews? Because so much shit is coming up that is just, it is so cringe. And I've been posting it on my Instagram because I'm just like, y'all got to know. Y'all got to know how crazy this man is, because this is who would take the reins if Trump got into office and passed away. The man that praises Project 2025 openly, and I don't know what's up with JD Vance, but he's got an issue with women. He really does. And I'm shocked. I'm not shocked. Let me stop saying that. I think I'm confused by it because his wife is like, she's clerked for Supreme Court justice, two of them. I think it was Alito and Kavanaugh. And he met her, I think, at Yale. Yeah, he met her at Yale. Like, she is a very exceptional and educated woman. And they tore her ass up too, because she's an Indian woman. And of course, the MAGA group just went in on that entire relationship, which, bro, you sold your soul to the devil and here you are. But I'm not even going to talk about his family because that's a shame. I want to highlight some of the things that he has said regarding women. And I'm just curious of how y'all feel about this.
Go to the polls in this country as a parent. You should have more power. You should have more of an ability to speak your voice in our democratic republic than people who don't have kids. Let's face the consequences and the reality. If you don't have as much of an investment in the future of this country, maybe you shouldn't get nearly the same voice. Now, people will say, and I'm sure the Atlantic and the Washington Post and all the usual suspects will criticize me about this in the coming days. Well, doesn't this mean that non-parents don't have as much of a voice as parents? Doesn't this mean that parents get a bigger say in how our democracy functions? Yes, absolutely.
I think that this should terrify everyone. It really should, because it doesn't even make sense. Because when you think about these childless parents childless women and people that he seems to be so concerned about, you have to realize that they pay taxes, and their tax dollars go to the public school system. And so they are in support of children. They are serious about their community, because that's the way community works. And I have to say that the working class folks are the ones that are actually paying their taxes and taking their country serious and their community seriously and actually pouring into these children. Whereas the corporations that the Republicans want to actually give tax breaks to, and the billionaires that the Republicans actually want to give tax breaks to, don't. But your Christian values you're going to take them and flip it into, oh, we're not reproducing for your workforce. And so we have abandoned our family values and also not adhering to your Christian values, which, okay, whatever. But when I do think about it, maybe it does make sense, because JD Vance and Republicans want to do away with public education altogether. And they want to solely rely on private education, which of course would have a terrible impact and effect on folks who are working class, possibly living in the margins, and underprivileged and underrepresented, which I feel like JD Vance should understand, because isn't he supposed to be the person that's appealing to that actual group of people? It's just all confusing to me. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get the play here. I don't get the messaging. But what's even more crazy is that they're still leading in all the swing states, Trump and Vance. People are clapping for these messages because I don't know. I don't know that folks are actually critically thinking. Or maybe their heels are just dug in. I have no idea. I'm going to play another clip from JD Vance. You ready?
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
So the childless cat ladies, this is biting him in the ass, because there's a lot of, I haven't seen many Republican women, but I see a lot of independents on the Twitterverse that are not happy about this. And a lot of Democrats who are revved up to just vote against this guy based off of this comment. As a reigning childless cat lady, that's a ridiculous statement. I don't think I could be more invested in the politics of this motherfucking country and in my community. Well, I won't say that. I could be more invested because I could invest my time more, and I'm figuring out ways to do that besides just talking on this microphone. But I'm pretty locked in, JD Vance. In addition, Kamala Harris has kids. They're not biological kids, but she has stepchildren. Hello, she's married to Doug. Doug has 2 kids. Doug's kids came out and actually supported Kamala and was like, he don't know what the fuck he's talking about. We love our stepmom. Doug's ex-wife, the baby mama, she came out and said, Kamala Harris and I co-parent. We are a blended family, and that woman is a fierce protector of my children. She's been in their lives for a very long time. They consider her a second mother, and she is doing her damn thing. Pete Buttigieg, who I love, by the way. Pete Buttigieg has children. He has an adopted child or children. Not exactly sure, because I think that he wants more. I don't know if he got that child, because I know he had a really hard time adopting the first one. Why? Because he's in a marriage that is same sex. And this country is way living in the past and just upholding their Christian values, and they make it completely hard for these people to actually parent and love on children. Also, JD Vance, you are offending a whole part of the electorate, because guess what? You are against IVF. How many women want to have babies? I actually just saw Jennifer Aniston came out and sunned him. She said, well, you're against IVF, bro. And I'm grateful for the fact that, like, I have a cat and I don't have kids, but I'm sure that so many other women who are struggling to have children, who have actually conceived with IVF, would really take issue with your position on it. So I don't understand the JD Vance play, because it's just too easy to rip him apart. Like, he's smart, but he is not cunning. He's not swift with his messaging. I mean, let me play a campaign ad. I'm just dry as fuck, y'all. I mean, I really, when I saw this, I thought it was a joke, and it's not. And that's a shame for him.
Thing to me, Democrats say that it is racist to believe, well, they say it's racist to do anything. I had a Diet Mountain Dew yesterday and one today. I'm sure they're going to call that racist too, but it's good. I love you guys.
What? Huh? If Joe Biden did that, every Democrat would have called for his fucking head. They would have said, he got to get off the ticket. He got to go. If Joe Biden went out there and started talking about Hannibal Lecter at the DNC, Barack Obama himself would have went out on that stage and tackled him. And Michelle would have came out and strapped him to the chair. And they would have carted his ass away. Okay? The double standard here is just wild. Also, you pandering to your audience to talk about Mountain Dew, they ripped him up. They ripped him up for that. And they, not being Democrats, I saw hillbillies against JD Vance trending on Twitter. Again, it could be Democrats cosplaying as hillbillies. Who the fuck knows? All I know is this shit ain't landing because that crowd felt just as awkward as he did. Poor thing. I don't know what's going to happen with him. I'd be really interested to see if Trump stays with them. I don't know, though. Moving right along to the main event. Vice President Kamala Harris, who may become Madam President Kamala Harris. Kamala has been thrust into a position and a spotlight that my mind cannot wrap around being able to handle and manage. Kamala has 100 days to convince this country to vote for her. She has 100 days to introduce herself to the country and basically 100 days to save this country from Project 2025, Trump, and MAGA world, and possibly 2-3 more right-leaning MAGA Supreme Court justices that generation will feel after we're all gone. This is a position that she wanted. I don't think she wanted to go about it this way, but she wanted to be president of the United States. We all know that. She ran against Joe Biden in 2020. She obviously was preparing because her historic rise and the historic kind of support around her was so quick and swift that it's just like she was definitely working behind the scenes. She was getting prepared. There's just no question about that. I think she is completely competent and ready for this job. She's over fucking qualified, y'all, period. On the last episode, have to be honest, I questioned whether the country was ready for her. And we'll see. I am being shocked by the rallying around her that we are seeing. I hope, I'm not going to doubt this woman because she can do it. When I hear her speak, when I see her campaign, I'm going to get into all that. She can do it. My hope is that a perfect storm happens where Trump keeps being more of himself and this country is reminded of who he is, and he just keeps exposing his true colors, that JD Vance keeps exposing his true colors, and that these independent white women, white men, which we probably won't get too many of them, we'll see, and right-leaning Black men and independent centrist Black men will recognize the candidate that most represents their values. And I hope that she can continue with this momentum. I really, really do. A lot of conversations are happening online around how unfair it is for this Black woman to be in a position to have to save a country that's probably refused to save her. And that's a real conversation to have. I think what's interesting is that when I observe these conversations or listen to these podcasts where people are talking about it, the nuance isn't really had around the nuance isn't had in the conversation where we talk about, yes, how unfair that is, but also how we so desperately and rightfully so should be in these positions of power. Like a Black woman president shouldn't be so far-fetched. It shouldn't feel like she is there saving us from ourselves and doing this labor. And it's really hard rather to hold those two things, right? Because I want to see a Black woman president. I want to see a Black woman in every fucking role. I don't want there to be a ceiling ever on Black women, but it's very real that there are. And I think it's smart of her campaign to not address that. Her campaign is not talking about how historic this election is. Her campaign is talking about the vision that they have for the future. We all know that it's historic. But if we look at it as that, when you're looking at it from a political lens, that's going to be weaponized against her as DE&I. We're going to get into that. But I just don't know how to rectify that in me too, where I know that this election is going to be won on the backs of Black women. I'm seeing more white women know that. I'm seeing them speak in those terms and attempt to hold themselves accountable, I think. I have a hard time rectifying that and also rectifying how badly I want to see her do it. And it's going to be something that we grapple with, you know? It really is. And maybe it'll be easier to grapple as folks name it as such, you know, as people who have kind of ridden on the coattails of Black women being the saving graces of this country, especially as far as the voter bases, you know, as they start to actually take some fucking accountability and name the thing, put words to that labor, maybe it'll be easier. I don't know. But with that said, it's a real conversation to have. It's not one that I'm going to have by myself on a solo episode. I would really want to have Shanti on for that to really help me tackle that, because I'm sure she's feeling it as well. But anyway, the Democratic Party aligned. I thought it was going to be chaos. I thought that it was going to be an open Democratic convention, an open nomination project. I was like, oh my God, they're going to be hollering and screaming like 1968. We're going to look disorganized. We're going to just look just so powerless, and Trump's going to win. Well, no, it wasn't chaotic. Her team mobilized, and it's evident that they've been mobilizing in the background. Her messaging right now is clear. It's effective. The tone of her emails, the tone of her tweets, they don't feel inauthentic. They don't feel too politically safe. There is a point of view. There is a little bit of an attitude, a little bit of personality that you can attribute to her. I'm sure she's not writing them, but the team that she has in place, I think, is doing an excellent job on creating a narrative around who she is, on introducing her to us. And then her slogan, "We're not going back," is brilliant. because We're Not Going Back addresses Project 2025. It addresses Trump's agenda. It addresses what a existential threat he is to all of us. But it also addresses that there is a future ahead. And that while that is there, we're not dealing with that. We are marching ahead and we are moving forward. So I'm really impressed. I mean, this is a masterclass, I think, in how to jump out there and in how to be ready when your name is called. Child, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. And sis was fucking ready. Slow endorsements from Barack, Michelle, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries. Saw a lot of people pissed off with the Obamas. A lot of people. And I initially was as well until I started to just hear different political talking heads discuss this. And it made a lot of sense to me, especially people who worked in former President Barack Obama's administration or who worked on his campaign. They were all saying, listen, Barack does not ever want to tip the scale, because what he's very aware of is that Republicans are already saying that Kamala was appointed as the nominee because Joe Biden, he got behind her right away. You know, he endorsed her, and I think he put his little IG note up, and then maybe 5 minutes later, his endorsement of her was up. And so with him endorsing her right away, it makes it really difficult for somebody else to step out and say, hey, I'm gonna run against her. Like, especially when she was getting so many endorsements from people who you would think would run against her, all of those names that were floating around. So I think what they were attempting to do was to see it play out and to make sure that the public felt like they were a part of this choice, and that it was done democratically. I mean, there are arguments to support both sides, right? There are arguments to say like, well, she was on the ticket, so technically people voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and so of course she just should be the default candidate. There are other arguments that would say, you know, the administration set it up so that she's the default nominee. We're here now. Whatever. I get it. This is going to be a talking point for the Republicans. I'm not about to give the Republicans a fucking talking point. They're going to say that she was appointed and the Democratic Party is not democratic at all. Fine. Say it. I don't care. I don't agree with it necessarily, but I am very happy that she gets to inherit the money that Biden had in his arsenal. Not that she needs it, because honestly, she is breaking fundraising records left and right. And this is where we start to see how having a new candidate, this young, brown, black, she's South Asian, she's Black woman, Jamaican woman, having her is energizing the base. I mean, you have the Win with Black Women call, who started it all. Again, Black women doing labor, Black women organizing because they've been doing this shit and they know how to do it well. Hello, Ella Baker. Hello, Fannie Lou Hamer. Y'all been here. The ancestors are poured into us and showing us the way. I mean, Harriet Tubman, organizer. Hello. But anyway, we've been doing this shit. Then you see Roland Martin pick up the torch. He's like, Win with Black men, let's go. He has a call. Then you have Shannon Watts. She's like, hold up. These Black women, we got to get behind them because they know what the fuck they're doing. She makes a call to Win with Black women. She's like, how did you do this? Because guess what? I want to do white women for Kamala, and I'm going to hashtag answer the call. And I listened in on that call. I wish I could have been on the Win with Black Women call, but I'm not a part of any of the Divine Nine, and nobody sent me a goddamn text to invite me. My feelings were hurt. But anyway, I listened in on the white woman call, and the first 20, 30 minutes of that call was them kicking their ass, their own ass. Glennon, that's my girl. She went on there and was like, listen, We have been freeloading off of Black women's labor for far too long. Our silence won't save us. I heard Dr. Yaba in her voice. I heard Audre Lorde. I heard all of the freedom fighters coming out of that woman. And she said, it is time for us to get our shit together. And I appreciated it. I'm not going to give her more praise than these Black women. I'm just going to highlight the fact that that's the thing. They raised over $10 million. I think over 5,000 and some people registered to volunteer for the campaign. Wonderful. There was the Gay Black Men for Kamala call. There was a Native, and then I don't know what they named that. I almost said Native American, but I don't think that is correct. And I'm not trying to offend anybody. But there was an Indigenous American call. I saw a flyer for white men for Kamala. I didn't hear much about that call, but I also wasn't necessarily checking for it as much. I don't know. All this to say, she's energizing the base. TikTok is aflame. I mean, she's smart. She used Beyonce's song. That's probably the most endorsement Beyonce is going to give, which is annoying. I need Shanti for that conversation though, because come on, B. And I'm just impressed. I'm impressed so far. I'm impressed. I'm excited. I feel energized. Her first campaign speech with Joe Biden calling in up in Delaware, where she's taking over his campaign headquarters. His staff is roaring for her. What an asset her husband Doug is. Boy, you can see that he loves this woman. You can see that he's proud of this woman. You can see how authentic he is. He is going to help with these white men, I think. And he's going to help with some of these Jewish white men who don't like what she said about Netanyahu. We'll see. And the timing. I was really, really worried about the timing of it all. I'm like, it's too late. I was like AOC. I said, it's too goddamn late to pick somebody else. And AOC and Bernie threw their support behind Kamala right away. They know they said, we got to fall in line and get this done. Because they were, like me, very skeptical of like, how are we going to replace the top of the ticket this late in the game? Hello? Nope. As I record this episode, and I think I said this earlier, we're 100 days away from the election. Less days than that if you consider early voting, right? So Kamala is reintroducing herself. And there's pluses and minuses to this timing thing that I'm realizing. The plus is that she has less baggage, because for many people who really don't follow politics like that, they don't know shit about her. They don't know. So she has less that she has to work through. The minus is that her first impressions now are of the utmost importance. Like, she cannot afford to misstep. She can't. She really can't. And that is a lot of pressure on this woman. I think another plus is that, this was announced after the Republican National Convention. Like I said earlier, MAGA spent all their time, energy, and money on tearing Biden's ass down. And they made some mentions of Kamala, but for the most part, so many of their attacks, their talking points they're now disarmed because they don't really fit Kamala. I mean, they're talking about Joe is too old to run, Sleepy Joe. Okay, well, Kamala is, I think, 59. Trump, you old. You're old now. You have a little bit of cognitive decline, it seems. Not a little bit, a lot of it. I don't think it was all there in the first place. Joe and his son, Hunter Biden, they are crooked. Excuse me. Kamala Harris is a former prosecutor of the motherfucking law. So, what, is she crooked Kamala now? What are we doing? And he tried that. And how? Where? Give us, help land that plane, because I'm not seeing it. And of course, the Republicans are shooting themselves in the foot. They are ostracizing their female base because they're coming after this woman. And we knew they were going to come after her. We knew that we were up, that we had to get ready for the onslaught of racial and, man, I don't even want, listen, some of the stuff that I see on Twitter, I wonder if free speech should actually be a thing. I'll leave it there. I'm not going to repeat the stuff, but the absolute attack on this woman. So gross. And I'm really enjoying following Bakari Sellers right now because he's close with her and he's like, she's used to this. She's been there, done that. It rolls off her back. She don't pay it no mind. It fuels her. She's better than me. That's all I say. They brought up her sexual history. Montel Jordan pissed. He was like, if y'all don't leave me out of this chaos and mess, okay, RVP dated Montel back in the day. Hello, that's not a bad person to date. I said, girl, you got some taste. I'm not mad at that choice. Hello. Also, he's a patriot. I think he was in the military and I don't remember which branch of it, but like, what are we talking about right now? So, okay, you're going to make fun of her for being super fine in that picture on the red carpet with Montel. All right, our VP was cute. She is cute. Hair is always laid. She dated somebody fine. What's up? Okay, so you're going after her sexual history. They're also going after her history with that mayor. Okay, so what? That's old news. Trump, do you really want that to be the base of your argument? Because you had sex with Stormy Daniels, dog. She talked about how small your penis was in the courtroom. The judge had to ask her to stop giving all of the details that she was giving. And I'm not going to slut shame Stormy Daniels and say you slept with a porn star. Okay, I don't care. You slept with Stormy Daniels while Melania was pregnant with Barron. Hello, Trump. Your first wife, Ivana, she accused you of raping her. You don't remember that? She said you raped her, bro. She also then, after you probably pressured her, she alleged that the rape was quote unquote not in the criminal sense. Huh? What? I don't even understand that. You were just found guilty and liable for sexual assault of E. Jean Carroll. So what are we talking about when it comes to sexual history? You like to grab them by the pussy. You don't remember that? Is that what you want to bring up on a debate stage? Because this here prosecutor will wipe the fucking floor with you, bro. You're saying that she's a DEI hire. Okay. Well, DE&I is now synonymous with nigga, if you ask me. But Trump, you're turning away Black and women voters with that. Hello, don't you need that base? What are we talking about? Also, they're saying that Kamala just absolutely must have a white male as VP. Is that not DE&I? Like, it works both ways. What are we talking about? What are we talking about? Trump is now also saying that she wants to lift the retirement age. She wants to raise it. That's false. Project 2025 wants to do that. Trump has also stated that she wants to make sure that women have access to after-birth abortion. He said that shit again at a recent rally. That doesn't even make sense. After-birth abortion. That is an execution. And that's also false. That was not legal anywhere. And now he's saying, after he accused Joe Biden of this, he's now saying that she is the one that was behind the weaponization of the judicial system to try to get all of these legal cases put up against him. What? I thought that was Joe. Which one is it, dog? Republicans have also unearthed the birther claims. You know, they're questioning whether or not she's actually an American, which is a page right out of the Obama campaign assault arsenal. Now, they are attacking her as the border czar, that's going to work a little bit because the border is a hot ass mess. Biden put her in a tricky position because she really didn't have any authority at the border, but she was tasked with doing a whole bunch, basically heading up the research on why the border is the way it is, et cetera, et cetera. People came at her for not going down to visit the border. And people have to understand she doesn't have the same budget as Joseph Robinette. Should she have gone to go see the border? Yes. But her travel budget is not the same as the president. But no excuses. The border's a hot ass mess, but that's not all on her to fix. Also, if we want to talk about it, again, there was a bipartisan immigration bill. There was money in there for more border agents. there was a, like, hello, you killed it, because that's all you can run on. Anyway, he's also saying that he's going to back out of the next debate. That's hilarious to me. And what was funny was he said his people put out a statement saying that they were backing out of the debate because they didn't actually believe that Kamala was going to be the nominee, because Barack Hussein Obama, they literally wrote this in a press release, Barack Hussein Obama had not come out in support of her yet. And so they feel like that he's working behind the scenes to get another candidate. So they're not going to prepare to debate her until they know who the real candidate is. Well, the very next day, Barack and Michelle endorsed her. So where's the debate, sweetie? Listen, I want to see this debate. Trump knows that he is in over his head, because what Joseph Robinette couldn't do was fact check Trump in real time. This woman here is a prosecutor, and she is positioning herself just as that. That's part of her thing. I'm the prosecutor. He's the criminal. That's y'all choice. Child. Now listen, speaking of the prosecutor, you like how I have this outline, right? Let's get into that. I don't know why my nose is itching. If you're watching on Patreon, it's driving me crazy. This is something she shied away from in 2020. Let's get into this, because this is where my Black and brown sistren, my far left abolitionists, my progressives, you're necessary. I love you. I consider myself one of you. But boy, y'all getting on my motherfucking nerves. So let's break down the history, because again, her history is colorful as well, right? But we're talking chestnut checkers. So let's get into it. She shied away from the whole prosecutor thing in 2020. And we have to recognize that the political landscape was vastly different then, okay? Black men were being murdered at the hands of the police, and criminal justice reform was being discussed more, okay? That prosecutor title was not appealing to her core audience. There wasn't a real appetite for that. Now, in her 2019 memoir, The Truths We Hold, An American Journey, she wrote, America has a deep and dark history of people using the power of the prosecutor as an instrument of injustice, okay? But many critics on the left definitely criticize her over her record, and we are going to get into her record. And they state that her record has fueled mass incarceration. We're going to get into that. I have not found that to be true, but I'm going to break it down coming up. Now, there was a town hall. It was like the first of its kind, and it was hosted by and for incarcerated people and their loved ones that same year in 2019. And she really touted her record as the prosecutor and the district attorney. She singled out this, many people call it small, but it was pretty groundbreaking then, this re-entry program that she designed called Back on Track. And it was basically for people charged for the first time, nonviolent offenses, for low-level drug sales, that there would be something in place where they could get high school diplomas instead of prison time. She got a lot of flack for that, but she stood 10 toes down on that. She also proposed creating federal sentencing review unit that would consider early release for people who have served at least 10 years of their sentences of 20 years or more. All right. And as a part of her previous presidential campaign, she also released a criminal justice reform plan that sought to scale back incarceration, end the death penalty and solitary confinement, ban private prisons, and get rid of cash bail. Okay. Now, we head over to 2020. And this is where thousands of people are protesting. We're at the height of COVID. And she got her ass handed to her for this, where she said, this is a movement. I'm telling you, they're not going to stop. She was on the Late Show. And she said, they're not going to let up, and they should not. And we should not. And boy, that was not what America wanted to hear at that time. Much of America was not in favor of the protests, despite how peaceful many of them were. They were fearful. They didn't like it. And Kamala supported it. She also tweeted out a call for people to donate to a bail fund for protests in Minnesota. Another thing they did not like. I give you that background. We're going to go into her history as both the DA and Attorney General. But this is where I'm seeing a lot of Kamala is still a cop. Brianna Joy Gray, she drives me fucking crazy right now. Y'all know that I love her. She was on the Hill rising. She was let go because of what I think was unfair, but I think it was her very valid and harsh criticism of the Israeli government, of Zionism, and of Netanyahu. I'll leave it at that. But right now she's driving me crazy because she is just like, Kamala is a cop. She was a cop. She'll forever be a cop. There's no room for growth. Y'all are pawns. And that's that. And I see many people, Black and brown people specifically, who feel this way. And my question is always, what is your solution? But that's another conversation that I want to have with Shanti on the pod. I'm just going to break down and give you some fucking facts. People are saying that Kamala Harris sent 1,500 Black men to jail on marijuana charges. That has been debunked over and over and over and over. It originated from, what was her name? Was it Kelsey Gabbard? Hold on. Look at something else. Gabbard. Yep. Kelsey Gabbard was debating Kamala Harris in 2020. And she said that on the debate stage. And it took off. People clipped it up. They didn't clip up Kamala's response. But then Kamala was pinpointed as this Black woman who had incarcerated all of these Black men. I looked this up myself, but I fact checked it, and everywhere I'm seeing is that it's like not true. Stay tuned. NBC has a nice and succinct video on how this is not true. So instead of my long-winded self saying it, I'm just going to play their clip.
Looked into this claim about VP Kamala Harris and found that it's actually misleading. The number first came from a 2019 Democratic presidential debate where Tulsi Gabbard said
she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
But here's what we found. During Harris's tenure as California's Attorney General from 2011 to 2017, over 1,900 people were admitted to state prisons for marijuana or hashish-related charges. But cannabis-related cases in California are prosecuted by district attorneys in individual counties, not attorney generals. Kamala Harris was the district attorney for San Francisco from 2004 to 2011. And during her tenure, she only sentenced 45 people total, not just Black people, to state prison for marijuana-related charges, according to Mercury News. So no, Kamala Harris did not send thousands of Black men to prison for marijuana charges.
And there you have it. All right. There's also another great article that I think folks should read. It's showing both sides of this. It's in the New York Times. If you don't have access to the New York Times and you want to read this article, I'm going to link it in the description as well. Send me an email at aroundthewaycurls@gmail.com asking for access to the article, and I will gift it to you. But Kamala Harris, mass incarceration, and me. Many progressives mistrust her for her past as a prosecutor, as an ex-convict, and also the son of a crime victim. I can tell you it's not that simple. That's the name of the article. Long ass name. Very interesting. And you also have the ability to listen to the article instead of reading it. Again, it'll be linked in the description. Let me know if you don't have access. All right. Now, fast forward to 2020, Kamala Harris sponsored a police reform bill that she was widely criticized for as too progressive. I have another clip that I'd like to play where she's talking about said bill. I think it's a very important clip. She's talking to Chris Matthews on MSNBC.
Let's talk about the legislation first, Senator. I want to start with this sort of framework. I've talked to a lot of activists and folks working on this issue from before Ferguson on, and there is some real frustration, I think, among people that different attempts at reforms, body cameras, which were a very big point of reform, police training, all kinds of discipline actions for police, that they failed to sort of do the thing that we want to happen. What is your case for why this package wouldn't fail, would actually have real teeth in changing things?
Well, it builds upon everything that has happened in the past, Chris, but what it does most specifically is it is completely and totally directed at one issue, which is accountability and consequence when there is a violation of law, when the rules are broken. So in addition to what you mentioned, our bill, Justice and Policing, which is sponsored by the Congressional Black Caucus, of which I am a member, Senator Cory Booker and myself, and so many of our colleagues are endorsing as co-sponsors. What it will do are things like change the national standard for use of force. So currently in so many jurisdictions, Chris, when there's an excessive use of force, the question in a courtroom when reviewing that is to ask, well, was that use of force reasonable? Well, you can find reason for just about anything. It's not a fair standard, and it's almost insurmountable when we're talking about prosecution of excessive force. So we're suggesting that it be changed to ask the question instead, not was that reasonable, but was it necessary? We're talking about doing pattern and practice investigations. When I was Attorney General of California, I initiated pattern and practice investigations of law enforcement agencies that were accused of discrimination. So we want to strengthen that, put teeth in it, so that, for example, the United States Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division will continue to do the work that was started under a previous administration but stopped under Donald Trump for most intent and purposes. But also that those folks in the Civil Rights Division will have subpoena power to be able to go after those police departments that have a pattern and practice of discrimination. In addition, we are proposing that there need to be independent investigations. I will tell you, as a former prosecutor, no matter how well-intentioned a DA or a state's attorney, the reality is that there is, at the very least, a lack of appearance of absence of conflict when that prosecutor is investigating a police officer from an agency they work with every day. We need to have independent investigations. And then another piece is transparency in terms of data. Again, when I was Attorney General, we opened up the California Department of Justice's data, which otherwise journalists had to claw out of us. We opened it up, and I said, look, we want to make sure that the public has information about deaths in custody, arrest rates based on race and demographic information. So these are the kinds of things that are in this package, and including our anti-lynching bill. And to your point about how far have we come, the fact that we can't last week get through an anti-lynching bill at this year of our Lord 2020 is ridiculous. So the obstacles are there to passing the legislation, but it's good work. It's not enough. It does not address what we need to address in terms of really dealing with what will truly create safety and healthy communities in America. It's a very specific focus, which is accountability and consequence in policing.
Okay. I really hope that everybody took in what she just said. Okay. A key point of what she just mentioned was that she wanted there to be a federal investigation into police killings because she understands that when you are a DA or a state's attorney, right, that it is incredibly difficult to investigate a group of people, the police, that you work side by side with on a regular basis, which is why there needs to be an outside independent investigation. That's going to come up later. And It's going to be a tricky part of Kamala's history. But the fact remains that this is 2020, 4 years ago, and she's saying this, what I believe is based off of her own learnings being an attorney general. We'll talk about it more. But I would be remiss if I did not play the other clip of Kamala talking about defund the police.
Here, I'm sure you saw the mayor in Washington D.C. obviously painted Black Lives Matter on 16th Street. Other protesters came and painted the phrase "defund the police." That phrase has gotten a lot of traction. The president clearly views it as politically advantageous. He's been tweeting about it. Joe Biden today coming out and saying, "I do not support it." What does that phrase mean to you? What is your reaction to it as a policy prescription?
So, Chris, we have to reimagine safety and public safety in America. You know, the status quo has been to determine and create policy around the idea that more police equals more safety. And that's just wrong. You know what creates greater safety? Funding our public schools so that currently 2/3 of our public school teachers don't have to come out of their own back pocket to pay for school supplies. What creates safety? Investing in the economic opportunities of communities, creating jobs. What creates safe and healthy communities, making sure that all people have access to healthcare, mental health care, and that it is within their reach, meaning it is affordable. These are the things that create safe communities. And when in America today, many cities, as the total city have of their budget, 1/3 goes to policing, we all have to step back and ask, is that the smartest and best way to actually achieve safety? Through healthy communities, we have safe communities. And I also have to point something else out, Chris. When you go to middle and upper middle class suburban communities, you don't see the patrol car sitting out on the corner and patrolling the streets like you do in other neighborhoods. You don't see the kind of police presence. But you know what you do see? You see well-funded schools. What you do see is families who have the ability to get through the end of the month and not worry about how they're going to put food on the table. What you do see are the access to capital and access to public health and to health care. So we do need to reimagine how we as a society are going to, in a smart way, achieve public safety. We don't want police officers to be dealing with the homeless issue. We don't want police officers to be dealing with substance abuse and mental health. No, we should be putting those resources into our public health systems. We should be looking at our budgets and asking, are we getting the best return on investment as taxpayers, much less what is morally right and what is right in terms of actually having safe communities that thrive. And also I'll mention, and part of what we have to do here is also look at the militarization of police departments and the kind of money that is going to that. And we need to demilitarize police departments. So there's a lot in this conversation, but at its core, one of the issues that I think we should all agree on is that it is old thinking, it is outdated, and it is actually wrong and backward to think that more police officers will create more safety.
I'm going to pause there because that is abolitionist thinking. That is in line with it, y'all. It is. And for a Democratic senator to say that is a really big deal in our day and age. And of course, we're like, well, she should be saying it. But you have to, and we're going to get into this when exploring her history. There are political prices to pay. And so when you're in politics, you have to weigh the outcomes. That's why it's so tricky to try to change things from the inside, because you're still at the mercy of the machine. And I'm not one of these people that doesn't think certain progress can be made, because it has been made. But it is extremely difficult. And so I saw this today where this specific interview is being brought up on both Republican leading media sources and also Democratic and more independent leaning media sources, where neither side, this is where many sides meet. This is where bipartisanship kind of ends and everybody agrees. Everybody's partisan on this issue, except for the far, far left, like the AOCs and the Bernies and people like that, and the squad and third party voters, right? Listen, people don't agree with this. They don't agree with defund the police. They don't. Okay? She's getting her ass handed to her by both Democrats and Republicans on this. Democrats are saying that, this policy is not popular. Republicans are saying that she is not tough on crime. And their whole thing is about fear mongering and saying that crime is taking over America. And that's why we need Donald Trump to set us all straight. Listen, defund the police is poor messaging. The slogan is not effective. I agree with the intention. I agree with the mission and vision, but the actual slogan it's not getting the job done. People don't understand what it really means. And it requires a 3.5-minute clip in order to break down the nuances of what that means. And when I tell you what I'm learning in couples therapy with Shanti is that people stop listening after 10 seconds. If you don't get their attention then, they're not taking it in. And so that slogan, that's your 10 seconds. And they're going to make their decision based off of that. Reimagine the police. Listen, people are going to hate this take. And I hate this take because I'll say defund the police all day and night because I get it. But the reality is that if you want people to actually listen, you have to be more effective with the messaging. And it's also been co-opted by Republicans who have been very successful with the messaging. The defund the police means you just want chaos and no law and order. And they are the party, right, of law and order. So this is something that's going to come up, and I would not be surprised, which she already is. She's not necessarily backtracking, but she's avoiding that type of language. She didn't respond to this, but someone from her campaign said that, Vice President Harris is very proud of her history of being a progressive prosecutor who looks at crime fairly and justly, but like they're not going to talk about defund the police. Okay. My very left-leaning abolitionist friends, I hear you, I see you, I am you, but she cannot use that messaging and get elected because it's not popular on either side. It doesn't mean that she won't enact policy or instruct Congress, right? Because Congress is the ones there, they make the laws, instruct Congress to pass legislation that support funding community programs, right, over policing. It doesn't mean that she won't try to put her thumb on the scale and influence different governors and mayors and things to make change. It doesn't mean that the conversation won't continue, but she's not going to use that language. And so we have to be critical in our thinking, in our understanding of how she has to be strategic. And she's got a hell of a job because she has to appeal to far more than who Trump has to appeal to. Trump has his fucking base. That's that. All Trump has to do is appeal to his base and figure out a way to get people to hate her. If they can hate her and he can instill enough fear, then independents will vote for him, right? And then he's good. But she has to appeal to young people who are, many of them, solely focused on Gaza. And I get it. She has to appeal to the unions. She has to appeal to the police departments. She has to appeal to the white women in rural America. She got to appeal to a whole lot more motherfuckers. Okay? It's real tricky. Now, let's talk about her timing and let's talk about her history. I was talking to a friend, Obi. I was talking to my friend Joelle. They all get on my fucking nerves, if I'm being honest, but they bring up really great points and they just irritate me because, you know, they're bringing up her history and it's a colorful history. It can be a tricky history at times. But what I am saying is I don't think that we are examining this history and putting it into perspective and understanding the actual time period and also understanding the political consequences. So let's talk about it. And I'm not giving her bail. There's some stuff on here that I'm like, girl, what are we doing? What are we talking about? But navigating political system, that's a hard job. So let's talk about it. Okay. She started working as a prosecutor in the late 1800s, in the late 1980s is late. Sorry, it's 11:30. And the early 1990s, okay? In 2004, she becomes the San Francisco district attorney, right? So now she's the top prosecutor for the city, okay? In 2011, she becomes California, the state's attorney general, top law enforcement official in the state, okay? And she held that position from 2011 to 2017. 2017 is when she becomes a U.S. Senator for California. So let's talk about her time as a DA. Now remember, this is in 2004, all right? As a district attorney, again, that's the top prosecutor for the city of San Francisco, she refused to seek the death penalty against a man convicted of shooting a police officer, Isaac Espinoza. She faced opposition from fellow Democrats, Senator Dianne Feinstein, RIP, that called for the death penalty at the officer's funeral. But Vice President Kamala Harris stood her ground as an act of principle, and that cost her key political allies. She then received almost no support from police groups during her first run for Attorney General in 2010. So boom, she takes a political stance. She goes against Dianne Feinstein, who is a senator, and she pays the price for it. And she learns immediately, oh, there's consequences for being righteous. Heard you. Now, she's still a DA. She pushed for more systemic reforms. Her most successful program is one that we talked about called Back on Track. Again, it allowed first-time drug offenders, including drug dealers, to get a high school diploma and a job instead of prison time. All right. She also got California's 3 strikes law. She looked into this and she was ahead of her time here. So under the law, someone who committed a 3rd felony would go to prison for 25 years to life, even if the 3rd felony was a nonviolent crime. But Vice President Harris required that San Francisco's district attorney office only charge a 3rd strike if the felony was a serious or violent crime. Again, this is 2004. She is ahead of her time here. You have to realize that. She also did embrace some tough policies, right? While she was in the district attorney's office. One that is wild is that she had an anti-truancy program that targeted the parents of kids who skipped school and threatened them with prosecution and punishment. Now, my father was the head of truancy and delinquency prevention in Philadelphia for some time. I know for a fact how important family centers, how important giving parents more time and more access to their children helps prevent truancy, not locking them up. Now, I listened to an interview of her talking about this. And she was talking about how, oh, there was this mother who, when this went out, she brought her kids into the living room and sat them down and said, listen, if you don't go to school, she's going to lock you up and me up. And it scared them straight into going to school. I'm sure that might have happened once or twice, but this was bad policy. Okay, this ain't it. Now, some considerations. The political climate at this time was far less open to progressive criminal justice policy. It just wasn't a talking point, really. The Democratic candidate for president the year before, who was John Kerry, he had run on hiring more cops and adopting a zero tolerance approach to gangs and cracking down on drug trafficking. The conversation around that time was tough on crime, period. And this is the Democratic nominee. So you have her ass in the Democratic landscape, political climate, doing this type of work, which was just not in alignment with the party at that time. So she was ahead of her time. Her colleague, Tim Salliard, who worked with her while she was a DA, said when she became district attorney, no one was talking about progressive prosecutors. She was absolutely an outlier within the California District Attorneys Association and got tons of pushback and criticism while working there. Okay? Now, we're up to 2011. This is when she becomes Attorney General. Attorney General, top cop of the state, okay? I shouldn't say top cop because that's a Republican. Excuse me, that's a talking point to tear the sister down. She is the top law enforcement official of the state. Same thing. Okay. By this time, criminal justice reform has started to spread a bit nationally, right? Congress had passed the Fair Sentencing Act in 2010. That was the one that reduced sentences for crack cocaine. And even states like Texas and South Carolina, they started to roll back punishments for nonviolent crimes, mostly because they couldn't afford to house the prisoners, which is just so on brand. And then you have Larry Krasner in Philly, who was like far more progressive. Like things are starting to shift, right? So this is where a lot of the things that she did as district attorney, they would kind of be par for the course around this time period. And this is where she gets tricky because she got her ass kicked a bunch while she was a DA. So by this time, she expands her Back on Track program, which is good. And after Black Lives Matter takes off, she introduced and expanded what her office described as the first of its kind training to address racial bias as well as procedural justice. Okay. So then she made the California Department of Justice the first statewide agency. She talks about this in the MSNBC clip that I played, to require body cameras. And she launched Open Justice. And this is where, among other data, that it's basically a platform that allows the public to track reported killings by police officers, right? So she is not in favor, like sis is not favorable with the cops. She the top cop, but the conversations is that she's actually against us and we're sick of her. Okay. But there's also things where she maintained the status quo, all right? Her office, and I want to be really clear about that, her office, not her specifically, her office fought to release fewer prisoners even after the Supreme Court found that overcrowding in California prisons was so bad that it had amounted to unconstitutional, cruel, and unusual punishment. Okay? There was a gentleman, Daniel Larson, who was proven innocent by the Innocence Project. Now, her office claimed that he filed his petition for release far too late after the legal deadline. Well, that went to court. A court did not agree, and he was released in 2013, thank God. Hard stop. I'm not making excuses for that. While it was not her, it was her office, the office that she oversees. And while I understand that she was getting bad press from the very people that she's supposed to be working with and was probably getting a lot of political pushback, this is unacceptable. It just is. It's very difficult to read this and not feel a way. Now, with that said, here's the other thing, and duality is a thing. She likely wasn't involved with these cases. Why? Well, because the Justice Department, their policy didn't require state lawyers to seek approval from the Attorney General. So the people that were prosecuting these cases, she says, weren't running these cases by her. And she addressed that, saying, there are cases where there were folks that made a decision in my office and they had not consulted with me. I wish they had. Even in that statement, she's not saying they were wrong. She's not saying that she should have done something different. She's not saying that the policies are problematic. She is being her lawyer self and saying and giving herself some bail, while also avoiding their responsibility, her responsibility, and the issues with the actual arguments that were being made. Harris could have and should have changed the department policy. She could have changed that policy where the state's attorneys had to run their cases by the Attorney General. She could have been more hands-on with pushing reform if she was willing to risk more potential backlash from the people that she worked with. Now, here's another one. She also went back on the death penalty stance that she had. Now, we talked about that early in her career. She stood 10 toes down and refused to give a gentleman, a man who was guilty of killing a police officer, the death penalty. When she ran for Attorney General, she shifted her position on that, and she told voters that she would enforce capital punishment, and she did. In 2014, she appealed a judge's decision that deemed California's death penalty system unconstitutional. She also overlooked and defended law enforcement officials accused of misconduct. In one case, a state prosecutor, Robert Murray, falsified a confession, using it to threat the defendant with life in prison. A court threw out the indictment, and Harris, her office, appealed it, dismissing the conduct because it did not involve any physical violence. The conduct of the officer, that is. She also resisted in some attempts to hold police accountable for shootings, including a bill that would have required the Attorney General's office to investigate killings by police and efforts to create statewide standards for police-worn body cameras. So, she's not telling them not to wear body cameras, but she's not enforcing a statewide standard. She's not throwing her weight around as much as she could have. She's resisting the pushback that she's going to receive from the people that report to her, from the people that she works side by side when she is prosecuting cases that are viable and actionable. She's avoiding that. And what's really interesting is that she brings that up on the MSNBC interview as a reason, as rationale as to why, as a senator, she said, we have to have outside independent investigations for police killings because it's far too difficult to try to do these investigations on the people that you're working side by side every day. And I don't think she just meant difficult in terms of emotionally difficult. I think she meant politically difficult. I think she meant your job will be on the line. You as a state's attorney, you as an officer, there's just so much that goes into that. And so the record as an attorney general, not so great. Then she gets to the Senate and completely champions criminal justice reform. Completely champions it. It's more of the MSNBC Kamala. So you have her, what I see is it sounds like she came out progressive, right? And then she was like, oh, wait a minute. This might not work in my favor. What am I going to do? And then she shifts to appeal a little bit more to the masses and acquiesce to that kind of system in order to be able to either rise to the top or get to a place where she feels like she can actually make some real change. Now, we're not going to act like she didn't do anything that wasn't on the side of criminal justice while she was an attorney general, but there are definitely lots of ways in which she let us down and probably let herself down. So it seems like when she got to the Senate, she might have been a little more empowered to do her work. That's where we're at with Kamala. Listen, some people are going to look at her record and they're going to feel like she's completely untrustworthy. They're going to call her top cop. And I get that. I do. And I don't know if I completely trust her. But what I do know is I cannot trust Trump. Or actually, I can. Actually, we can trust Trump to do exactly what he has laid out that he's going to do. I trust that JD Vance and his agenda are real and that they want it done. Kamala, she feels like somebody that we might be able to work with. We do not have to love this woman. She does not have to be our hope. She doesn't need to be our savior. She doesn't need to be our celebrity. She has to be our civil servant. And guess what? I was really interested in the fact that the Working Families political party, which is like a small political party, they endorsed Kamala. And you want to know why? They said that under Trump, we'll be left playing defense and trying to deflect the worst of his attacks against our communities. To have a shot at a working families agenda, we've got to win at the top of the ticket. Our endorsement of Vice President Harris doesn't mean that we'll never disagree with her or never have contrasting views on policy. This election, however, is bigger than any one person. I think that rationale is sound. I really do. And, you know, Shanti says everything in life is a negotiation. It's a compromise. And honestly, we do it every day. We navigate these negotiations and all of the compromise every single day. I don't want to work. I'm sick of it. But I know that if I don't work, I won't be able to sustain myself. So there is a strategic negotiation that I have with myself every single day. Every day, I have it. And I think it's incredibly important for us to look into any politician's history and their record on policy. I get that. I think it's equally as important to be nuanced by considering the political landscape during their years in service, and by really examining the shifts in their stances and the why and the rationale behind them. A politician who progresses over time, who learns, who listens to their constituents, that is not a bad thing. It's not. And my fear is that a lot of folks are like, yeah, she's going to say that now. Well, listen, this was 2020. That clip I played is 2020, sweetie. She was saying it then. And she had intention to run for president. And she said it. And she got her ass handed to her, and still getting her ass handed to her for saying it. So I am choosing to resist the usual cynicism that I have in me, especially when it comes to politicians. I'm going to resist the urge to label it as pandering. And I'm going to consider that it might actually be progress. That's where I'm at. Okay? So you have Kamala Harris. You have Trump. We don't know who our VP pick is. That'll be a whole other episode. But these are our choices. Somebody is going to be in that White House. You decide who you want it to be. You decide who you can live under. You decide who your children can live under. You decide who gives you a better shot at a life that is full, that is meaningful, that is safe, that is prosperous, that is easy. We want ease, and we're in a fight. So ease don't really feel like it's on the way, but that's where we're trying to get. And so I want us all to really lock in, to really activate, resist the urge to throw your hands up and feel like this is too much, and feel disempowered. Just resist that, okay? We are powerful. Join these calls, hear these people, see these grassroots campaigns, feel the energy, and understand that we have to be strategic, that the popular vote is great. Even the top of the ticket is necessary, but we need to be thinking about these swing states. We need to be making sure people are registered to vote. We need to be linking up with these grassroots organizations that are doing this behind the scenes work, that aren't necessarily for this two-party political system, but that are the organizers and activists. We need to be talking to them as well. And when we get Kamala Harris in office, we need to be pushing the same fucking pressure on her that we were putting on Biden. Because at the end of the day, she is a public servant. I fear that there is no pressure we could put on the Republican Party to give two shits about our needs and our wants. That's it. That's really it. Hopefully this is helpful. I don't know. But I just think, there are going to be some people who are going to pick things out of her past, who are going to talk about the political structures. I mean, you have Black Lives Matter coming out and saying that, Black Lives Matter global, I think, or maybe not global, but a chapter of Black Lives Matter coming out and completely shitting on the fact that Kamala is the nominee because the process doesn't feel democratic. It's like, what are your intentions? Like, what is your end goal? There are some people who are just going to pinpoint the problems without any solution. And I want us all to resist that. It's fine to pinpoint a problem, but please offer a solution, or at least inquire on how to get to one. Be curious. Be strategic. But just being one of these people that's just nothing is ever good enough. These politicians are never going to be perfect. We are never going to agree with them. They have to appeal to too many motherfuckers across this country for us to ever completely agree with them. Ever. I mean, the person that she might pick as VP is the governor of Pennsylvania, and he's a Zionist. I am never going to agree with his stance. I'm not a Zionist. But many people are like, well, if she's strategic, she'll pick him because he's going to appeal to another party, and your VP pick is supposed to round out your views. Here we are. We're not going to like it. We're not going to love it all the time. We're just not. And we just have to continue to do the work and do the best we can. I understand that Trump is leading in many of the swing states and many of these polls for a reason. And it's because these people don't agree with us either. They don't. So where is the medium? Where is the balance? How do we get there? I hate it. I hate it. There's some things that, again, I always talk about, I will not compromise on. This is just non-negotiable for me. And I encourage everybody to figure out what are those policies that are non-negotiable for you and vote with your heart. If it's not her, at least be resolute in that decision and be prepared for the outcome. That's it. All right. This is my solo episode. It's 11:18. I still need to edit this bad boy. And thank you. Hopefully you'll hear from Shanti and I soon. And hopefully she traveled back safely from Washington. I'm going to go check her location now. I love y'all. And I can't end this episode without just mentioning Sonia Massey. I can't talk about that. I can't watch the video. I don't have it in me, and it would be inappropriate to talk about her and her murder at the very end of the episode without giving it the attention that it really requires. I just can't. I can't bring myself to really even read too much about it, if I'm being completely honest. I just can't. It's too much at some point, and I'm trying to do better at doing what I can. But I know that there are other platforms that are talking about it. I saw that Higher Learning has an episode completely on it. I haven't listened to it yet. I will when I'm ready, but I know that other people are doing this work too. So I'm leaning on that because I don't have it. I don't have it. Nope. And you know what? With that said, listen, one candidate, Trump, wants full police immunity, and the other candidate spoke out about how we need a federal investigative team within the justice system to investigate these killings and prosecute them. So very interesting stance from the two options that we have. Anyway, thank y'all and have a good night.